Hey everybody, it's Justin Roth here. We're going to kind of take a little bit different approach today. Instead of a Jacob Collier song tutorial, we're going to start to look at some of the techniques, specifically on guitar, that Jacob tends to use. And I don't want to overemphasize the word technique. We're kind of making it. We're going to look at it more in terms of like habits that he's got in different finger picking patterns specifically. So let's jump right in. We're going to look at Little Blue. We're going to look at Summer Rain as examples. If you've watched some of the other tutorials I've made, you've maybe learned some of the chord shapes, and that's maybe why you're looking for this next level of approach. Because on those tutorials, I basically focus on teaching you the chord shapes and learning the fingerings for those. And because there's so much freedom that we have in the right hand, because Jacob is not overly technical with his right hand. So it gives us a lot of freedom to kind of feel out what works for us. But what I'm going to do is break down his tendencies, the way he tends to do things, to how to balance between playing the chords underneath and how he uses the droning strings. Now, it's not a consistent pattern throughout any one of these songs, but some sections have specific patterns. So I'm going to break down those in Little Blue and in Summer Rain. In the Paul David's interview, when they talked about Jacob Collier reinventing the guitar, Jacob talked about how he leads with his ear, not his technique. Let's really take that to heart, because when we look at what he's doing and try to emulate it, we can feel limited if our right hand is not up to speed. The other thing that's great about it, and the reason we don't have to be overly precise, is that none of the voice leading that he uses in the chords rely on those top two strings. So we're not relying on plucking those upper strings at specific times. Now, there are times when he modulates that we try to avoid them because they don't work over the chords. That's maybe the most intentional choice, to not play them. But I like to think of using these strings, the top two, the high two, as kind of like accents, almost like a cymbal, like a drummer would play the cymbals with a brush, a very light touch. We're not talking big announcements here. Or you can think of it like a B3 organ player. There's these pads or drones that are sustaining, that are always kind of pulling us back, in this case, back to the tonic. They are extensions to the chords, and don't worry, we're not going to get into a bunch of theory, but they're extensions to the chords. But it's about a conservative use of them, to not overuse these strings, because they can kind of take over. Not overusing them. 2, dynamics, because it's real easy to let those ring louder than the chords, so it requires a little bit of restraint, or just, control, to be tasteful with it in a light touch. So that's, from a technical standpoint, the main things to be factoring in when we do this. Don't try to copy note for note what I'm doing, because I'm not copying note for note what he's doing. I'm just breaking down things that he tends to do quite often. Okay, so Little Blue. Now, I've got a full tutorial of that song up here. Both there's and in the description. There's a full one in this DAEGAD tuning for those of you on 6-string, or DAEAD for those of you who have purchased the Taylor Jacob Collier signature model 5-string, or modded your own. So let's just start out doing the intro, because the intro has a very specific pattern, and it's repeated throughout the whole thing. But it is not a pattern that he uses elsewhere in the song, until he gets the a cappella part and he's just setting them up. So, but it's not like a verse-chorus pattern. This intro is all built on if you're on 6-string, it's the 4th string, 2nd string, and the 1st string. If you're on a 5-string, it would be your 3rd string for this note, your 1st string, and your 2nd string. And all it is an alternating pattern of thumb, index on the 2nd string, thumb, middle on the 1st string. So, and it does this throughout the whole intro. I'll speed it up a little bit, and all he's doing to change is his left hand moving up the different frets. Now, I've got all of the tabs for this in my store for all the transcriptions I've released on Jacob's songs in the description. All right. Here's the intro. Pattern is consistent. There's even things that he does technique-wise that I would recommend he does a little differently, but who am I? You know, he seems to be doing quite well. But I will point out some of those things, the things that I would recommend that you perhaps try differently. Here's one thing that Jacob does that I actually find difficult. Not because it's technically difficult, it's actually limiting. If you notice on his videos, he tends to rest at least his pinky. It kind of looks like his ring finger might be there as well. And he's only really picking with these, his thumb, index, and middle finger. Now that to me is very limiting, but I also know he's not coming from playing guitar for a long time. And he's making it work for him. And obviously it is. With my fingers here, it's not very comfortable, and these fingers tend to hit those fingers. The other thing that you'll notice about Jacob and where he finger picks, he tends to finger pick over the neck here, as opposed to back here by the bridge or over the sound hole. Now it may be completely intentional, or it just might be because that's where he likes to rest his pinky. But tonally speaking, if you pick your strings back by the saddle, they're more snappy. But if you pick them more up by the neck, it's a softer tone to it. So that is also a tonal choice. And when he gets into the verses, now like I said, he's not doing any voice leading, relying on those two notes or those two strings to tell us what chord we're on, because they are just like this undercurrent. So when he playing that progression, there are times when the chord is moving and we need to hear what chord we are on. We need to be picking that lower part of the chord because that is the motion. It's not like we're strumming the whole thing. And so when we get through that chord change, we've got the opportunity to add a couple of those ornaments. Now, I could give you a rough estimation of like if you had to count it, 1 E and a 2 E and it's like beat 1 is usually establishing the chord, and it could be thumb, index, ring going up those 3 notes. Sometimes it's thumb, index, ring, index, 1 E and like that. And then on beats 2 and or beat 4, he kind of tends to alternate that as as much of a pattern as I would say, so that we establish the chord every time we're changing a chord, to emphasize that at the early part of the bar or early part of the beat, and then adding those accents afterwards. And in those transcriptions, I mentioned like I don't necessarily include every single time he hits those open strings, because I don't want you to be attached to this idea like, does he hit it on the end of 2 and the E of 3?
Because if I don't do that, it won't be right.
Because I guarantee you, every time you see him play it, where those happen are more in the ballpark of what he's done before, as opposed to it being exact. Don't try to do things exactly the way he does. Chordally, yes, because that's what's really making it work. And these are the ornaments. And the thing that you have to technically be most attentive to is the dynamics, so that those don't take over and get too loud, and that you don't use them all the time, because what we really need is those chords underneath. He tends to use just thumb, index, and middle. I would find it more freeing, and maybe this is just decades of muscle memory, is saving some of those high strings, at least the first string, for my ring finger. So let's go switch cameras here, so that we could go and maybe hit the second string with your middle. And here I'll see I'm alternating, inserting that bass again. If we go 1 E and 2 E and again, this is an approximation. And then I might avoid those top strings if I've got a chord change in there. Because that melodic or that voice leading part, the motion between those chords, we've got to prioritize those to pick those first. Out of curiosity, if this is your first time seeing one of my tutorials, this one's a little bit different from the other song ones, like I said. I'd like to know, because I'm kind of curious how people are finding this and how many people are interested in the technique things versus the songs. So if it's your first time, down in the comments, just write first time on there just to let me know. Also, if you want even more in-depth access to extra tutorials to understand this tuning and direct communication with me, join us over on my Patreon. That's in the description below. And that's where we're gathering a community of people who really want to kind of dive in even farther, because learning the songs is only one part of the beauty of what Jacob is offering us by sharing these songs with us. It's really about learning a vocabulary more than learning any sort of technique or memorizing entire songs. To me, the best takeaway is learning the vocabulary and the intentionality behind playing in this case in this tuning, DAEGAD, and learning how we could start to apply this to our own songs, to cover songs. So I've got other videos coming up about that to start demonstrating how we can use this approach. And, we could say Jacobify other songs, but what I really want is for you to find the vocabulary to make this your own, because Jacob didn't invent this tuning. Joni Mitchell has used it, but the way that Jacob uses it is very signature and very inspiring. So again, let's learn from our heroes. Let's learn that vocabulary and find ways to incorporate it into our own art and our own music. Okay, so let's take a look at Summer Rain. Here's another one that starts out with a very repetitive pattern. This one is a really great place to start too. It's kind of like how Little Blue starts. It's only on 3 strings. So this one is on the 6th string. If you're on a 6-string guitar, it's on the 6th string, 2nd string, and 1st string. It's going to be, instead of alternating like Little Blue did, of thumb, index, thumb, middle, this one goes thumb, index on the 2nd string, middle finger on the 1st string, index finger on the 2nd string. So 1 E and 2 E and then he's just changing chords. Let's give you that up closer. Again, this is all in the transcription. The difference is the transcription shows what the actual intended chord is that he would normally be fretting if he was playing the whole chord. Here he's only playing the bass note, or the lowest note of the chord that he's playing. The chords themselves, it's the D to the A to the B minor to the A over C sharp. So what those chords are right now are less important because we're focusing on right hand. So I did one Summer Rain tutorial, which is up here also in the description, where it's just his Mahogany Sessions performance with chords underneath it on the video. There's a full transcription as well, but I did not do a full tutorial breakdown like I have on Little Blue or Never Gonna Be Alone and some others. So if you want me to break that song down further, do me another favor so that I know, is down in the comments, just type Summer Rain in there, and that will let me know that I should prioritize that song as a full tutorial. Find the freedom in emphasizing the chord changes. So you're focusing these three fingers, like Jacob, on those lower three strings, and then on beats 2 and 4 as the general ballpark is where you can start to articulate the strings one after another. As long as we're in control of those dynamics and not overusing them, we've got a lot of freedom, and let them be the bed that glues all the chords together. And when you get to a modulation, like in the second pre-chorus, here he has to start avoiding the top strings because they don't work over it. Wouldn't work there. So that's just times with, depending on the song or the chords that you're playing underneath it, there are times to specifically avoid it. See you next time.